Hi guys, Frank here with Build Your Own, and in this video we're going to replace the water pump in my 1994 Chevy C1500 with the 4.3 liter V6 engine. I'm going to replace the water pump and I'm going to actually replace the lower radiator hose. Mine seems to be fine, but I just happened to pick this up because why not? So while I'm doing this job, I'll replace the lower radiator hose as well. Like all my videos where I repair my truck, this will be a by the book procedure. You can see here that I actually have the factory service manuals for the truck. Of course, this manual includes how to replace the water pump, but I also have this Haynes manual, which also includes how to replace the water pump. So we're actually going to follow the procedure per this Haynes manual because I think, well, most people can get a hold of this manual and it's a lot cheaper than getting a hold of these service manuals, which are probably a little harder to find. I got these on eBay. So we can see here that the truck is still leaking coolant. If you've been following videos on this truck, you know I've been using some Blue Devil products to try to stop this coolant leak. So far, none of those have actually worked. The truck is actually leaking from the front of the engine and the back of the engine. Let me show you what I mean before we change the water pump. Okay, so here we are up under the truck, right up under the oil pan actually, and we can see all this coolant that is just leaking down onto the front cross member. If we look up over here, I can see some coolant on the very edge of the oil pan. And when I follow some of this trail, and we'll try to get a look at this in a second, I can definitely see coolant running down that lower radiator hose coming from what looks to be the water pump, which is why we're going to replace it today. Here we are at the back of the engine where the engine meets the transmission, and we can see a little drop of coolant right here. So I know that the engine is leaking coolant from the back. I can't really get a good look at it. I'm assuming it's the back of the intake manifold gaskets, but I'm not 100% sure. So that's one of my reasons why I haven't done the intake manifold gaskets yet, because I'm not 100% on that. And then lastly, here's the real culprit. We're up on the engine here, and you can see all the coolant on the lower radiator hose. If we follow that trail up, you can see that coolant goes all the way up there into the water pump. And so there's definitely something going on behind the water pump or with the water pump. So we're going to replace the water pump and also find out if there's anything else going on behind the water pump. So with all this said and done, let's get started. Okay, so we've got the Haynes manual open to the water pump removal section. First thing we need to do is disconnect the negative battery cable and drain the coolant. Okay, so I've removed the negative battery cable. This is an 8mm bolt here. Unless yours is different, mine's 8mm. I've also got the coolant draining, as you can see, and it's super easy to drain the coolant. There's a coolant drain plug on the passenger side, lower radiator. You can see it down there. You just twist that counterclockwise to loosen it up. I actually did a video on replacing it, of course, because I broke mine already. But we're going to go ahead and drain it out this way. And then when it gets, well, basically empty from draining it this way, then I'll go ahead and drop that lower radiator hose into one of those buckets underneath the truck and get a little bit more coolant out that way as well. While that coolant is still draining, we'll go ahead and take off this fan shroud. These are 10mm bolts. There's just 3 of them that hold this fan shroud in place. And then you can just move this radiator hose out of the way to go ahead and lift this out of your truck. Okay, now that we have the fan shroud off, we can see a lot better, and you can actually see some of the leaking that's been going on, what I believe is from the intake manifold gaskets, which is why I think it's definitely that those need to be replaced. But yeah, it looks like we're almost done draining down here. So what we need to do next really is I'm going to go ahead and drop this lower radiator hose and get some more coolant to drain out, and then we just need to remove these nuts to get this fan off of here. I guess if you have a 1996 and later V6 4.3, there was just the one nut that threaded onto this, but I've got a 94, so it's just 4 nuts right there, and I'll find out what size those are in just a second. Okay, so I think all the coolant is drained out of the truck. You can see it all down there, and I've already removed one part of the lower radiator hose from the radiator. I just need to get it from the water pump, but it's kind of got itself kind of glued on here, so I've got to pry it off. Once we do that, then we can remove what are these 13mm nuts to get this fan clutch assembly off. Okay, there's the lower radiator hose. It's removed from the truck. It's a little soft, but it's definitely not done, but it's definitely a little soft. But like I said, we've got a new one over here, so we'll go ahead and replace it. Now we can go ahead and loosen up these 13mm nuts and get this fan clutch assembly off of here. So I've wrestled these 4 13mm nuts off of the fan pulley, and as you can see, one of them has completely threaded itself out. Now when I was loosening these up, the engine does want to turn to the left, so for a while there it was just turning, but once it hits on that compression stroke, you have enough resistance that you can actually break these nuts loose. I guess you could hold the pulley down here and hold the engine if you were having a really hard time with it. Okay, so the fan shroud's off. I did have to give it a good tug, a couple of good tugs. I guess you could tap it from the backside as well, but it came off pretty easy. That one stud is, as you can see, still in there, and that's fine. The other ones are where they're supposed to be. They're still in there, so that looks good. So now let's move on to the next step. So really the only thing to do before we can actually remove the water pump is get this pulley off the front of the water pump, and to do that we need to take this serpentine belt off, and so that requires us to move this tensioner out of the way so we can loosen up the belt and get the belt off. So I've already taken a picture of what the belt looks like, and on the fan shroud there is a picture of how this goes back together. So this is a 5/8 drive here, and I've just got an extension on here, and I can just crank that counterclockwise, and that loosens up the belt. And now I can take the belt off, and now we can get this pulley off of the water pump. Okay, once that fan belt came off, the pulley came right off the water pump, super easy. So now we can come over here and take a look at the water pump, and I don't know, it doesn't have any signs that it's in bad shape. I don't really know where the leak is coming from. This is the weep hole that, you know, supposedly you're supposed to lose some coolant out of here if the water pump starts to go bad. We can see that that's dry as a bone. So we'll have to see what it looks like underneath. We've gotten this far. We're gonna go ahead and replace the water pump one way or the other. So there's just 4 bolts. There's one here, there's one here, there's one here, and then there's one down there. So we're gonna go ahead and those look to be about 13mm or so, or a 5/8. And so, well, not about a 5/8, probably about a 13mm. We'll double check on that. And so we'll go ahead and get that loosened up and pulled off the truck. As you can see, I'm using quite the extension, so that way for the ones that go way far in here, I can get in here really easy without getting my hands too close, banging up my knuckles, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so I've got all 4 14mm bolts removed. You can see the water pump hanging there. It didn't really want to come off, so I gave it a nice little tap on the top side there, and then it went ahead and came off for us. So let's get it out of the truck. And it looks like it's in really good shape, to be quite honest with you. Oh, there it is. It is leaking from a weep hole. There's the issue right there. There it is. Okay, so as we can see, one of the coolant leaks this truck has, because I'm sure it's got more than one, is this water pump. So good thing I finally decided to go ahead and investigate, take this water pump off. Obviously putting the new one on is not going to be really hard. I'm just going to clean up that area a little bit, and then we'll be ready for reinstall. Okay, so I've got this area cleaned up as well as I could, and so now we're ready to put the new water pump back in the truck. As you can see, I've got everything set up here. So I removed those studs off the old water pump. I got the other one out. We can see that if we look at these really close, we can see that these were the sides that were out, because they got the rust on there and the dirt and the debris. And we can see that there's like this little stop marks here on these bolts, because I got to thread these back in here. And so we're just going to go ahead and thread these back in. It's super simple. I'm not going to bore you with doing that on camera. I'll just do this one, and I guess it's just going to go all the way down until it seats, and then that's pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. So I'll go ahead and get these done, and then we'll go ahead and get these water pump gaskets fitted. Okay, so I got the gaskets on the water pump, as you can see, and they're 2 of the same gaskets. This gasket has 2 holes, as does this one. This one covers 1 hole. This one's wide open because they're 2 different openings, but I think it'll be okay. Let me show you what it looks like on the truck. So if we look at the truck here, we got one side of the water pump has, you know, 2 holes right there and just 1 hole in the center. And then this one down here is a little bit different. It's got a bolt hole, but it's got a secondary hole down here as well. So like I said, I think it'll be okay. I've actually got 2 sets of these gaskets and they're both the same way. So that must be how they come. So we'll go ahead and put the water pump on the truck now. The water pump on, and I put the whole thing on as a unit, just how you saw it on the table a second ago. And then I threaded it in, and it kind of stayed up here by itself, and I got one of these started and got it in. What the Haynes manual doesn't tell you, or I didn't see it, was what you need to torque the bolts down to, and these need to be torqued to 30 foot-pounds of torque. I've already snugged them up. I've got my torque wrench. And so we'll go ahead and snug these up and get done with the job. There we go. We got 1 click there. Okay, so now I've got all 4 of those bolts tightened down to 30 foot-pounds. I think what I'll do next is put the new radiator hose, or the new lower radiator hose, on the truck. Okay, so the new water pump is installed, and I did do it with a screwdriver, but I ended up using this 8mm socket because that is a nut there. I use this 8mm socket to go ahead and tighten it up really good. But I didn't tighten it up too tight on the lower radiator side because, well, that's a plastic housing, and I didn't want to over torque it. So it's snug, but it's not cranked down as tight as possible. Okay, now I need to get the drive belt back on, and as we can see, like I told you, right on the shroud here, there is a diagram of how that looks with and without AC. I have AC. I also took a picture, so I'll be able to get it right. So let me go ahead and get this drive belt put back on. Okay, so before we can actually get this drive belt fully put in, I had to put this pulley back on. It's not bolted down. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and put the fan shroud back, or the fan clutch back on, so I can go ahead and tighten this pulley down, and then we can go ahead and loop this over here, right? We'll have to go ahead and torque this down. We can go ahead and loop this over here, and then we get our right amount of tension. Okay, so I got everything back together. I got the pulley on there. I got the belt back on here, the belt drive back on in the right order that it's supposed to be on. The fan is tightened. These bolts can be a little finicky, and as you go to tighten them, you know, the engine's going to turn over. And like I said, you could hold the pulley down here on the harmonic balancer or hold the bolt down there. But this does spin, you know, it does spin clockwise, so it is going to keep staying tight. So I don't think we're going to have to worry about that. So these bolts are tight, so we're good there. So all I really need to do is put the shroud back on, put coolant in it, and connect the negative battery cable. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then we'll be ready to start the truck and see if anything leaks out, well, at least from the water pump anyway. Okay, so in the middle of getting ready to put all this back together, I was filling the truck up with coolant, and then all of a sudden the radiator starts leaking coolant. So everything needs to be overhauled with this cooling system, it seems like, with this truck. So the water pump is done. I'm sure the water pump job is fine. I'm not going to go ahead and start up the truck. So like I said, the only thing left to really do is put the fan shroud on, fill up your coolant. These trucks, at least the 4.3 liter V6, I know maximum it takes 3 gallons of coolant. And I was almost through 1 gallon before it started leaking. It's still leaking under there. So go ahead and top off your coolant, plug your connect your battery back up, and you're good to go. Check for any leaks at like your hose or anything, and where you know, obviously where the water pump screws in. Other than that, you're good. So obviously in the next video, I'll be taking care of this radiator. So hopefully this video helped you. Sorry I couldn't finish it up. Please follow the truck. I've got a lot more videos to do. Thanks for watching.